Craftsmen Online listeners. In this episode, we will be exploring the Dhammapada, introduced and translated by Eknath Easwaran. The Dhammapada, which in Pali means the path of truth or verses of Dharma, is a concise collection of the Buddha's teachings in verse. Passed down since the 5th century BCE, these lessons offer practical guidance on ethics, mindfulness, and the path of liberation from suffering, the foundation of Buddhist spiritual philosophy. I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Jason Short, and on behalf of Craftsmen Online, the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Library, and our most worshipful Grand Master of Masons in New York, Stephen Adam Rubin, I thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoy this show. Joining us tonight in our conversation, I have Worshipful Brother Jason Intardonato, retired Buddhist monk.
A former Buddhist monk.
Former Buddhist monk, and past master of Suffolk Lodge number 60.
That's right.
And our brother Malik Walker, who is a current Soto Zen Buddhist priest, and brother of George Washington Lodge number 285 here in New York. Unfortunately tonight, our Right Worshipful Brother Kanjan Cedarman was unable to make our broadcast, so we send him our blessings and warm regards. Just to get this started off, tell me a little bit about yourselves, how you came into Buddhism, and how the Dhammapada has affected you individually. Jason?
Sure. I was one of those kids who was interested in odd things like religion and philosophy, magic, and all things mysterious from a young age. And so between ages maybe 12 and 15, I was reading everything I could find, every holy book, from the Bible to the Quran, to books on the occult, the Book of Mormon, Buddhist things, Taoist things, and trying, kind of evolving from my upbringing, which was Roman Catholic, which had inspired me with an interest in monasticism. But as I read and studied, my kind of affinity started to move towards other things. Eastern things in particular started to stand out to me as resonating with me. And when I was about 15, I found a copy of the Dhammapada in my high school library and read it. And it was a time in my life that was very difficult, I'd say, in high school. And there was a lot going on. I think I had a lot of inner turmoil. And the Dhammapada somehow, in the course of an afternoon reading it, like it was a riveting, Pulp Fiction novel, it just held my attention intensely. As soon as I opened it, I read it in one afternoon into the evening, and you could say it stopped my mind. It stopped all that whirling confusion I felt for, sort of incessantly at that, teenage time. It paused it, and it felt so clear and simple but powerful that it really just kind of stopped me in my tracks and made me consider the idea that I didn't necessarily have to listen to my own thoughts, in the sense that you're being kicked around by your discursive mind habitually, without an awareness that it's possible to find space around those thoughts so that you don't necessarily have to follow them impulsively. So just even that day, I remember just feeling like the impulse to eat food even, I, for the first time in my life, in a conscious way, just kind of questioned, like, okay, my habitual brain is telling me, to go eat food. I'm like, what if I just don't do that? You know, it's telling me to go to sleep now. What if I just don't do that? And I think I didn't sleep or eat for about 24 hours. I felt so awakened by this. Eventually I slept and I ate and went back to regular life, but it had made a profound impact on me and really anchored my attention to Buddhism as my main interest out of all the things I had studied. So it's what started my kind of journey into Buddhism.
Amazing. Amazing. Malik?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was also a kid interested in interesting things, weird things, and I started, I guess, play meditating when I was really young because I was really interested in Master Splinter from Ninja Turtles. It's like that, he was my guy. Yeah. The kind of peaceful warrior, elder kind of person. And throughout high school, I read a lot of different things, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, always fascinated by that. I knew I was going to study religion in college and what have you. But it wasn't until probably when I started college where I met a friend who, this was at a college in New Orleans, a black college in New Orleans. He, is a black man and he's Buddhist. And I was like, wait a minute, black people can be Buddhist? It's like, you didn't tell me that. It was like, yeah, there are black people that are Buddhists, right? Tina Turner is a Buddhist, right? So I said, it just kind of opened up this whole thing where it's like, oh, I can actually go there. It's not just this remote thing. It's not just a bunch of ideas. It's not a fantasy. And that really kind of opened up this whole world of literature. And the Dhammapada came up. And the way that I always kind of treated the Dhammapada was, kind of opened it up and said, what's Buddha telling me today, kind of thing. And it wasn't until a lot later, after I became a father, like this was after my monastic ordination and having become a householder, where I started to really take seriously reading it to my son when he was a baby. And that's when it kind of started to sink in, because it was saying things that that I didn't know how to say to my son. Oh. And, it was also being a dad and coming from a family where I didn't really have a lot of strong role models or a dad. It's like the Buddha's being a dad to me at the same time. It was kind of like that. Oh, it's kind of how it kind of sank into me.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, for me, I grew up in an Episcopalian household and would consider myself to have been spiritual growing up. However, had gotten to a point during my Sunday school courses for confirmation where I started to have a lot more questions than what the attending pastor was able to answer. Specifically surrounding Christianity. A couple of things that didn't sit well with me actually had moved me so far as to choose not to be confirmed into that faith. My best friend's father happened to be a Buddhist and had the graphic novel Buddha collection at his house. And that had piqued my interest. So by the time I was 14, I had Buddhism on my radar, but had not really come around to the Dhammapada specifically until probably a decade later. The book itself was similar to Jason's experience, something that upon reading has a very positive and profound impact on me immediately. That point onward, I would consider myself philosophically aligned with Buddhism. I think the thing that stood out to me most about the Dhammapada and how it's affected me in my life is that just through words alone, so much power can be transmitted, and so much love can be transmitted, and that it doesn't take a PhD, and it doesn't take years of monastic life to really wrap your head around the central teachings of the Buddha, the Sangha, the Dharma, and how to cultivate a response mechanism of loving kindness over a reaction based in fear or cravings, and the understanding that our thoughts and our perceptions are not what make us who we are. With that, coming forward into today and this conversation specifically, my heart is just aglow with gratitude, not only to be able to be speaking about this, but to be speaking with both of you brothers, and to open the door to our audience and their understanding that not only is Buddhism a very valid spiritual practice and philosophical practice in life, but the Dhammapada itself is also a spiritual text that is capable of being venerated on the altar of each of our respective lodges. I wonder, have either of you seen the Dhammapada on the altar? And perhaps did either of you take an obligation with the Dhammapada in hand?
I did not. The only way I brought my Buddhism to my degree experience was when prompted to pray. I, from being in the monastery, was able to recite some of our lineage prayers from memory, and so went with that as my prayer, and which I said aloud in the lodge, and I think surprised a lot of the brothers who were probably not too, hadn't seen that happen before.
Familiar,
yeah,
definitely.
But no, I took my obligations on the Holy Bible. Yeah.
I did take my third degree obligation with the Dhammapada. The first one I did it with the Diamond Sutra. So, you know, I kind of, there's another brother in the lodge that we were raised together. He comes from a Hindu background, so I have all of the books, you know, as a religion professor. So I gave him the Upanishads, and we had the Dhammapada, and we also had our other brother had a very old Torah. So it was interesting to have. There were 5 of us that got raised that night. There was a couple Bibles, and then all of these other religious positions. So yeah, I mean, and there was a time also I did a lecture on Zen and the craft and all, and was able to chant some of this, you know, the Heart Sutra, and that definitely hadn't happened in that room before. So it was fun. But yeah, so yeah, I did take my obligation on Dhammapada. This particular one, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, for translation, this is the one I'm most familiar with. I really appreciate Eknath's ability to provide so much background information, not only on the text itself, but also on the life of Shakyamuni, the culture surrounding the period. It's a wonderful text, and I highly recommend it to our audience. The other reason I think I not only recommend it to our audience, but I recommend it to people in general, is you can really get through it in an afternoon and go from a place of intense suffering or anxiety to finding relative peace in such a short amount of time.
I feel like it, in the sense of orienting yourself, you know, as if with a compass, which obviously relates to the lodge room. it has a very orienting power. It doesn't necessarily spell out the details of what you should do in life. It doesn't include the, I forget, 250 or 300 vows of a fully ordained bhikshu, but it simply says, do not do evil, do what is good, purify your mind. And these simple instructions are just kind of help you reorient yourself in a simple way in your disposition towards life, which I think also you can find relationship with in our degrees. Particularly, I think the entered apprentice degree and the Dhammapada feel closely related. Did you find any correlations between first degree and
Yeah,
the
I
text?
mean, now that you bring it up, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, especially the way that both of you kind of talked about your experience, right? This kind of coming from darkness to light, that, you know, this almost kind of birthing experience. It's like enlightenment is about becoming alive or living, becoming awakened to aliveness, you know, and I think especially with the entered apprentice degree, because there's so much you don't know when you walk into the, well, you can't see anything either, right? There's so much unknown that once you see what's happening, there's this profound experience of being kind of, I think, surrounded, embraced by something that, at least in my experience, was, I feel like I was always there, but I finally was able to get there, be present to it, right, in that room. So yeah, I think the Dhammapada definitely kind of connects really strongly with the first degree in ways that I haven't really considered just yet until you just brought it up.
Yeah, I agree. I believe that the first degree is fundamentally teaching us how to divest ourselves of our passions by effectively identifying what it is that's causing us suffering, and then understanding that it's possible to remove that suffering and to work towards the perfection of our ashlar is so very simple and so very clearly, to me, emblematic of the Four Noble Truths. The work that we do from there to align ourselves philosophically with the Eightfold Path. It's all really there in the first degree. I also believe, too, when we receive our new name,
Yes.
caution,
Yes.
it's so easy to see that in a negative light.
Right.
But really, what for me resonated is to be mindful. My new name is caution, and that is to be mindful of all of my words and actions.
Yeah, body, speech, and mind.
Right.
And there's a number of references in the degree towards that mindfulness and mapping that teaching onto the body in terms of the way the four cardinal virtues are discussed. And I'm not sure, I don't want to say too much about the contents of the degree, but just in terms of the four cardinal virtues, fortitude connects closely with the chapter on vigilance in here. And having that intentionality, that direction in your mind and determination is one of the things that you have to summon on this path and in the Masonic path. Justice.
Justice.
Right? Karma.
Right.
That one's easy to see the connection.
Right. Also the path, right? Following the path, right? The Dharma itself.
Yeah.
I think there's something interesting, you know, when you know, the new name is caution, that was really surprising to me because having gone through ordination, gotten Dharma names and all of that, it's like, oh, I got another one? I got another name now, right? But it was interesting that it's like, this is your name now. you know, that there's this kind of, that you're imprinted, right? Something about you. So in the ordination of a monastic or a bodhisattva, I think in most traditions, I don't know if you got to receive the Dharma name, you receive a name, and usually it's a message from the teacher to the student, right? Or some sort of kind of connection. In my tradition, my teacher gave me part of his name. So it's like everything is in kanji. And so he brought his name, part of his name into my name. So it's interesting that like to receive a name, right, is this kind of imprinting of the lodge upon you. It's a responsibility, it's a dharma. It's be awake, you know, especially in when it comes to being in the presence of others.
There's so much in Buddhism about analyzing the nature of self. And when you receive a new name, it's kind of a way of prompting the person to recognize that there's something more malleable about their notion of self than maybe they were aware of. And here's a new name. Now, you know, which is instantly, usually it has some kind of meaning, and it's associated with your Dharma practice, and now it's making you kind of reconsider yourself and what yourself is, and, you know. Also, when I received my name, I think in the Tibetan tradition, I suspect there's a lot of good-humored Tibetans, and I studied in the Karma Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. You receive your name, and it's very exciting, and you want to know what the name means, and you're instantly your ego is kind of magnetized towards whatever this name means, and you know, am I going to get a cool name? Is it going to have some sort of, you know, impressive meaning? And it only dawned on me in the last few years the humor in it, in that I think it has more to do with the teacher recognizing what you're going to need to work on and sort of baiting you with the meaning in the name.
That was exactly my experience.
My name translated to excellent fame, which was an unusual name amongst that Sangha. Everyone sort of, you know, raised an eyebrow to it, and it sounds a little grandiose. And in the last few years, I've thought about it, and I think it has more to do with concern over reputation and concern of how others see you, and the idea of fame or renown, or just, you know, being known. And, you know, this could be the teacher pointing out an obstacle for you.
It's usually like a lesson, or sometimes even a warning. My monastic name translates to great doubt. And I remember when my teacher gave me my robes and said that, my jaw dropped to the floor. It's like, what does that mean? And in the kanji itself, literally translates to mountain of doubt. And, you know, like I was like, and, you know, over the years, it's like I've had to climb a lot of mountains. I've doubted a whole lot. I mean, it's a very interesting thing also because, you know, there is a lot of work, I think, for the teacher to kind of identify something kind of very core to the student that is both kind of profound and very plain spoken, you know. And I think that's also true, especially with the Dhammapada, because, like you said, you don't need a PhD, you don't need, you know, years and years of training. It's so plain spoken and so it's so obvious. But then it's also like, you know, reading it, you wake up like, wow, it's been there the whole time.
Yeah,
you know.
right. Absolutely.
And so
I think the Dhammapada itself was always really intended for the layman, was intended to be accessible. And I think it encapsulates the genius of Gautama's ability to really concisely define how simple it is, but it's through the lens of simplicity that each one of us really learns how to complicate ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Simple but not easy.
Now, simple but not easy.
What I found striking, so as a Zen practitioner, Zen is a Mahayana tradition, correct? And I also understand that some sects of Zen also have Vajrayana lineage. But the Dhammapada in the school I studied was a Vajrayana school, which is, there are three, it's taught from that perspective at least, that there's Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana teachings. And the Dhammapada is clearly part of the early Pali Canon and would be more associated with the Hinayana tradition, the early monastic tradition, the early teachings of the Buddha, which focused very much on discipline, cultivating virtue, and a basic turning away from selfishness and self-concern to find freedom from suffering. There's two different ways to look at those three traditions, either historically, as that we don't know that the Buddha lived before these things were written down, long before. And so we don't know what the historical Buddha actually spoke. There's great historical evidence that he really was an actual person. There was an individual at that time. But as far as what he taught within his lifetime and what came from later evolutions of the tradition, it's hard to say. And I think probably from an academic perspective, most scholars would look at it and say this is a historical development. Later Buddhism developed Mahayana tradition, and even later Vajrayana tradition with influences from other cultures. But
for the sake of our audience, help to define
the meaning of those names?
Yeah, Mahayana being more of a liberal, and Vajrayana being more conservative, and sort of the diffusion.
Well, the way I would explain it is the translation generally is Hinayana is little vehicle, Mahayana is great vehicle, Vajrayana is like diamond or indestructible vehicle. And the vehicle part is in the sense that these teachings are a vehicle to help transport people from a place of suffering to nirvana or cessation of suffering. The terminology relates to the kind of teaching it is and kind of the scope of the practice. While they're each very profound in and of themselves, and little vehicles not to diminish that phase of the teaching, it's foundational. It's more similar to our degree system. If you draw that parallel with the first, second, and third degree being elaborations of further revelations of light, the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana have a progression to them, and particularly in the way each tradition kind of includes and transcends the previous. And from a religious perspective, the view is generally that the Buddha taught all of this in his lifetime, but some of it was taught in secret, or to certain students that were capable of understanding it, and it was passed down from teacher to student in secret, similar to Masonic secrecy. Not secret for the sake of it being anything scandalous or nefarious, secret for the sake that if a student's not ready to understand it, it's not necessarily helpful. So it's restricted to those who it will be helpful for. So from the way I was taught and from a religious perspective, I think that's the way people would generally think of it. So it is a kind of a progression, though, I think, in the way we understand it now, that parallels very, very well to the first, second, and third degree of Masonry. The Dhammapada and the Hinayana tradition focuses on virtue and discusses mortality and introduces the student very urgently to confront their own mortality, to contemplate it, to realize that time is short, that they have to act now. One of the lines in here that I love is just, I think it's just, wake up, don't be lazy. And so it's this sort of wake-up call. In the entered apprentice degree, we are also made, particularly if your lodge practices with a chamber of reflection or something like this, you're prompted to contemplate your mortality right from the beginning, and to try to frame this experience in that light, to reflect upon yourself. It's the same urging that the Buddha is giving his students in the Dhammapada. So just like an entered apprentice has some skills and some instruction and is able to do some work, and mainly start to cultivate themselves, they're limited, right? They haven't gone through the further lessons of the degrees. They haven't received all the working tools. So there's some limitation of scope in this, but in the Mahayana tradition, the great vehicle, right, the scope is expanded, and in the second degree, the entered apprentice now is introduced to a broad scope of teachings, right? Encouraged to study the world and to study the liberal arts and sciences, and to start to consider how to engage in the world and be of a benefit to a greater scope, beyond themselves. I think the Mahayana tradition is a much more socially, it's much more concerned with the benefit of all beings. Even though you can't say that the Hinayana is not concerned with the benefit of all beings, but the focus of the teachings are much more about individual liberation. And then the Vajrayana expands on the teachings of the Mahayana and discusses Buddha nature. Is very much about Buddha nature, which is talked about in the Mahayana, but really becomes a central concept in Vajrayana, where from the Dhammapada it's so much about effort and works and perfection, and it presents to you this almost impossible to conceive task that's being put before you to tame your mind and to develop perfection within yourself to the point of attaining enlightenment. And it might take still eons of time of rebirth before you actually get there. And you're focused so much on yourself, maybe you're meditating in a cave or in the woods, you're not necessarily in the villages engaging with the world you're in and directly benefiting people. It's still a benefit if you're cultivating enlightenment within yourself, even if you're solitary, but the Mahayana says, hold on, we want to be able to benefit more beings in this world now, and focuses a lot on compassion, and which the concept of compassion or brotherly love or concern for our fellow man is emphasized so much in our degrees. But the transition from something focused on kind of laborious work to social orientation to Buddha nature, which is the concept in the tradition, I think, most closely connected to what would parallel the God concept in the theistic traditions, the Western theistic traditions. My teacher recounted a story once, speaking to a student whose mother was evangelical Christian and had a hard time accepting her daughter being a Buddhist, and her mother would always ask her, but you believe in God, right? And while the God there are concepts of gods in the Dhammapada, because this was born from a Hindu Indus Valley culture, but my teacher basically said, you can say God, it's fine. When you say God, you think Buddha nature. Like it's the similar idea, particularly in the sense that it becomes more about realizing what is already there, what is already present, rather than feeling that you have to construct something.
Sure.
And I think the Master Mason degree is very much about revealing what is already present.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really brilliant presentation.
Sorry if I went on too long.
No, no, I think it was phenomenal and fascinating as well.
Can I say just
Please,
one?
yes.
Just kind of like a couple like an addition to what you're saying. I mean, that was beautiful. That
Yeah.
whole layout. I think, I think what you're saying tracks exactly right. In the Mahayana tradition, as far as benefiting all beings, right? There's the emphasis on the bodhisattva ideal, right? And the bodhisattva is one who achieves Buddhahood, but defers it until everybody else has it. All living beings, all sentient and non-sentient beings can also be there. So, particularly in Zen, there isn't an emphasis on reincarnation. Like, this is your last life. This is your time. This is here and now. You have Buddha nature, but now it's time to, have Buddha, share Buddha nature throughout your reality right now, right? So there's a bit of a kind of an existential urgency. And then, with the Vajrayana tradition, I always think about it as the esoteric tradition, where it's the contemplation, it's kind of flipping it inside out and saying, okay, yeah, it is already there, but it's but it doesn't look like we thought it looked. And, now we can contemplate differently, right? The nature of the mind, the nature of the self or not self. Right. And the fact that the infinite expanse between the heavens and the earth is between your ears.
Huh.
So,
The Bodhisattva principle is a better way of drawing that connection, I think, to the second degree.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the fellow craft, for sure.
Oh, brilliant. Now, we chose a few selections to share with our audience and discuss this evening. I'd like to go ahead and jump in.
Sure.
Our first selection actually comes from the opening of the Dhammapada's text, verses 1 through 5. We also have verse 33. We have verses 183 to 192, which is a larger section of text that I think encapsulates a lot of the heart of the text. And then we'll conclude with verse 259.
Okay.
To begin with verses 1 through 5, our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draw it. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought, like a shadow that never leaves. He was angry with me. He attacked me. He defeated me. He robbed me. Those who dwell on such thoughts will never be free from hatred. He was angry with me. He attacked me. He defeated me. He robbed me. Those who do not dwell on such thoughts will surely become free from hatred. For hatred can never put an end to hatred. Love alone can. This is an unalterable law. For a hook. It's pretty good.
But also just the mention of love. I mean, it's not something that you hear associated with Buddhism, right? It's peacefulness, it's mindfulness, it's a lot of these things that one would kind of attach or infer some sort of remoteness from sensation or from emotion or from intimacy, right? So that he's it starts out with only love can fix this. Only love, not resentment. To start there, right? I think is one of the most. It's a very interesting thing because love, at least for me, like implies a closeness, right? It's like you're not retreating from the world, you're getting deeper into it in a more radical way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Jason had brought up a point prior to this that in our Masonic career, it's very likely that we're going to run into somebody that we don't fundamentally agree with and may have discord with that is negative. And how do you then respond with love in that situation?
Right.
Yeah. I think there's so much on either the Buddhist path or Masonic path where people come with preconceptions about what it's going to be like, or what they're going to find, and that these people you're going to meet with, maybe they're not regular people. They're monks, or they're these are 33rd degree Masons, and they're somehow superhuman. But inevitably find that we're all just human, and the problems of the outer world are still going to happen, whether you're in the monastery or in the Masonic Lodge, and you'll have interpersonal conflict and disagreements with people. And some people are disenchanted by that, and they think, oh, I expected this to be perfect, so I'm discouraged, and I'm going to leave the lodge, or I'm going to cease my studies. Of course, this is the real world, and in the framework of either tradition, you have to do your best to try to learn from it and work with it, and whether it's from a Buddhist perspective or a Masonic perspective, learn how to keep your ego in check.
Sure.
And to look past your own self-interest. Have compassion for your brother, your fellow traveler.
Definitely. I mean, and bringing it back to that love is this unalterable law. That bringing it back to looking past our differences, and that when we can catch ourselves thinking these negative thoughts, what we're projecting outward onto this other person is something that may be ensnaring our own ability to stay present, to stay mindful, and to be in a position where we're responding to the situation from loving kindness. And not just reacting based on our perceptions, which are likely wrong, ultimately. The text gets into how to deal with immaturity, how to deal with those who are acting from a place not of wisdom. And sometimes I know for me, there's been times with brothers that I've disagreed with where the best course of action has been removing myself from this situation. And it's the love inside of all of it that allows me to still come back, and every time I may meet that brother, still meet them on the level and with the same open heart and generosity that I would meet any other brother with. But it's being mindful of the position of, if I'm starting to respond with, hey, this person wronged me in any sort of way, shape, or form, what is that? And I think that that's not just something within the fraternity, but it's such a universal thing where we examine where aggression comes from. We examine where hatred comes from. Where is that planted? And Gautama, right from the get-go, or at least his disciples, has said that this teaching is the first teaching to encompass, and that this teaching alone can radically change your life and radically change how you respond to your brother, or how you respond to your neighbor, and even how you respond to yourself. That love is an unalterable law, and there is no place for pointing the finger.
I like the metaphor used, I think, at least once in this text about throwing dust into the wind, and it just blows back at you, trying to put blame on others or hatred towards others is just causing self-harm, because it just, the karmic law, just, the rubber and glue law from elementary school.
That's right.
Just bounces back at you.
That's right. Oh, it's brilliant. That's brilliant. Let's move on to examine verse 33. As an archer aims an arrow, the wise aim their restless thoughts, hard to aim and hard to restrain. Now there's
Skim to it.
there's a lot of Masonic work that has to do with refining our ashlar. It's the craft of what we're doing. And here in the Dhammapada, we're presenting working with our mind the way that a fletcher straightens an arrow or a carpenter hones wood. Where do you feel within your own life just this practice of reworking your mind, where do you feel that has made a profound impact or the most positive impact?
It's interesting. At least from my Zen perspective, I don't want to speak for all of Zen, but from my Zen perspective, one of the things that a Dharma sister once told me when it came to your body position, your posture, is that you are the arrow pointing straight up, right? So the posture you're always constantly refining the posture, right? So, and with, meditation, or particularly in Zen, Zazen, right, seated concentration, it is the body-mind that you're working on. And the longer you sit, the more often you sit, over years and years and years, your body alters, right? They call it training, but it's really not training to do something, but it's your body retraining itself, getting back into some sort of original state, right? Your muscles, your bones are, kind of correcting themselves after a history, a karmic history of doing the wrong thing, bad habits and bad posture, bad breathing, all of that. That practice of sitting, right, or the ascesis, the actual spiritual exercise, with the body, changes the mind, because the mind is a part of the body. It's not separate. And so, especially with this particular verse, the body is the key to, like, you're refining the body is refining the mind, right? The deeper the breath, the straighter the posture, the more solid and steadfast the posture, the more solid and steadfast the mind, right? The quieter, the clearer, right? To not move means you can move faster. To not move means you can move rightly, but you have to learn how to not move, and allow whatever that happens to your body to configure, so that one can move.
The Pythagorean schools, the mystery school tradition, just the first tenet of silence. The Pythagorean mystery school, the initiates were expected to remain silent for 5 years behind a veil before they were even admitted into the court to be able to have a discourse. And it's that teaching of silence we can find across cultures, where when we learn to still our mind, when we learn to just be present, in the Zen tradition, just be the toad, just exist here, allow the wisdom to speak through you.
Yeah.
Like we start to identify how I hate to use the word evil, but how distracting or malignant sometimes our thoughts can become. And how much of our life and how much of our suffering becomes shaped by our compulsions, our sense cravings, our intrusive thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Where the real art and the real practice here seems really just to be come back to zero. Hone in on that. And if it takes your whole lifetime to hone in on that, so be it. But even being aware of those thoughts, to observe those thoughts, even if it's really loud, is already taking the wisdom of acknowledging that they're separate from who you are. Is already acknowledging that there's pain that you can remove from yourself. Jason, do you?
A couple things about this passage. What I think the metaphor you brought up initially about the working on the ashlar compared to these metaphors here of straightening an arrow and so on. I love that, and it's that you're finding the situation to be workable. You're learning how to make the situation workable, or you're discovering that it is workable. You know, this stone can be smoothed. This arrow can be made straight. And by engaging in the practice, you're, whether it be the practice of Masonry or the practice of Buddhism, you're discovering the workability of this present moment. What jumps out at me so much about this verse, about Buddhist practice and Masonic practice, as a fish hooked and left on the sand thrashes about in agony, the mind being trained in meditation trembles all over, desperate to escape the hand of Mara. Hard it is to train the mind, which goes where it likes and does what it wants. But a trained mind brings health and happiness. The wise can direct their thoughts, subtle and elusive, wherever they choose. A trained mind brings health and happiness. The image of a fish hooked and left on the sand, thrashing about, and the mind in meditation, being overwhelmed with discursive thoughts and emotions and what you might call resistance to being present, all these habitual patterns. For anyone who has sat for any length of time, you're very familiar with what that experience is like. And the practice of coming back to your technique, whatever it may be, coming back to the breath or the mantra or whatever your focus is, again and again is how you work with that. And in Masonry, we have our own contemplative, meditative traditions built right into everything we do. We don't usually talk about them like that, but from the very beginning, our candidates or entered apprentices, fellow crafts, are required to do some memorization work. And in order to memorize that work or any of the later lectures, if you take part in degree work, requires this same kind of coming back. You know, you're trying to memorize a line, you're trying to commit it to memory, your mind gets distracted and wanders away. You have to bring it back to the text, refocus, and just over and over again. And from the beginning, it's challenging. And then if you do a charge or you do the middle chamber lecture, you're on a whole other level of challenge. And it teaches you so much about what you're capable of, and that you can straighten that arrow. And it also anchors you to the present moment in a conceptual way, because you are focused on the text. You're not just simply resting and being. It is it is more of a analytical type of meditation, but
well, and it becomes easier too. Is the other aspect? You know, even when we deal with memorization, you know, a lot of the work that we're introducing exoterically to our brothers who are coming in, who have first been initiated, is that active meditation. You know, and there's a couple of different things we present in that degree, going back to our conversation earlier, that are introducing brothers to just mindfulness, meditative practice, and contemplation, but just the art of memorization in itself for shaping your mind.
Yep.
It's so difficult and it's so hard to start doing, just the same as going to the gym. And it doesn't take long, though, for one to start to realize it's becoming easier. When we first sit down for an intensive meditation, so quickly we are distracted. We are that fish. You know, we are wriggling against. I see the mind as like a plasma ball, you know, and all the little different hairs of plasma coming off that central diode. You know, every time we engage with a thought, we're just touching that plasma ball. But when we recognize that all of the thoughts that are going on are something separate, then we can slowly start returning to just the image of it being what it is. Just the same as returning to a mantra, returning to whatever we're working on masonically. We start to see that training the mind becomes an ally, becomes something that yields results. But we have to get over the initial hump because it's not easy. In fact, it can take a long time, or you may indefinitely never really still your mind. But I know for me, what I was able to do is to just start to recognize those thoughts as separate. And I'm sure for yourselves, just to get to be beyond that, we have to start realizing that none of that has a hold on who we are. So the craft of masonry, the craft of getting to a place where all of a sudden we can use our incredible capacity of focus, attention, and drive to take on something like the liberal arts and science, or to take on the teachings of the Lotus Sutra or a Diamond Sutra, to expand your knowledge peripherally from the base teaching. It comes from that repeated dedication. It comes from the craft of honing that arrow in. It comes from training your mind. It's brilliant. Should we move on?
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. Now, I had a couple of different quotes that we were knocking around to discuss, but it seemed really appropriate to hone in on chapter 14, the awakened one, verses 183 to 192, pages 170, 171. Avoid all evil. Cultivate the good. Purify your mind. This sums up the teaching of the Buddhas. Cultivate the patience that endures and attain nirvana, the highest goal of life. Do not oppress others or cause them pain. This is not the way of the spiritual aspirant. Do not find fault with others. Do not injure others, but live in accordance with the Dharma. Be moderate in eating and sleeping and meditating on the highest. This sums up the teachings of the Buddhas. Even a shower of gold cannot quench the passions. They are wise who know the passions are passing and bring pain in their wake. Even celestial pleasures cannot quench the passions. They are true followers of the Buddha who rejoice in the conquest of desires. Driven by fear, people run for security to mountains and forests, to sacred spots and shrines. But none of these can be a safe refuge because they cannot free the mind from fear. Take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and you will grasp the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the noble eightfold path that takes you beyond suffering. That is your best refuge, your only refuge. When you reach it, all sorrow falls away. So there's a lot that I love about that section, but what's nice to pair this with our last quote is we start with training our minds, but now we're introduced to more of the central aspects of the teaching, more of the Dharma, more of the work to be done. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that encapsulates your experience in Buddhism? How do you feel it encapsulates Freemasonry?
That's a biggie.
Sorry.
No, this is good. Well, the one good thing about this chapter is that it sums everything up. It's like, this is what you got to do. And one of the things that I like about the Dhammapada and what you just pointed out, what you just read, is that these aren't solutions, right? Buddhism isn't about a solution, or a cure, or some sort of I don't know, right? Something it doesn't fix.
Specific dogmatic answers.
Exactly.
To everything.
Right. It's not concerned with the truth, capital T. And I think, paralleling that with the craft is it's an open plane. We have the tools, we have the work, we have these things, and we're coming from different backgrounds to share in interpreting what these allegories and symbols are. Not necessarily to espouse them as though we would a religion. It's not dogmatic either. So I think, the Four Noble Truths, it's so summed up here. All of the Dharma is summed up in 190, right? Take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and you will grasp the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the Eightfold Path, right? The Eightfold Path isn't an 8-step program to enlightenment. It's all the things that you have to do anyways, right? Mm-hmm. Right breathing, right posture, right
mindfulness,
right
attention.
Right attention, right breathing, right? Did I say that right?
You said
yeah.
Breathing, yeah. Understanding.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Right understanding, right livelihood, mm-hmm. All of these things, right action, right. It's like what is the right thing to do? It's like, well, walk the path. You'll find out.
Yeah.
Take the refuge and walk the path. You'll find out. So we have the path before us.
Yeah.
It's practicing it.
And in the Middle Chamber lecture, you're provided with the tools for reasoning, your way to figure
Yes.
out how to make those decisions of how to live rightly. It's not that someone's telling you, prescribing exactly what you should do, but here you need to learn how to think for yourself,
right,
and understand the world.
Right.
The
It's
square of virtue.
Right.
Yeah. We're literally saying to righteousness. We're using the square to propel somebody towards a path of righteous living. Mm-hmm. And you're right. It's summed up brilliantly. And it's across translations you get different words, but effectively they all come back to the fundamentals of living. Mm-hmm. And there's an opposite to each one of these. And
sure.
The opposite of doing any of these things is something that is going to cause you suffering. Mm-hmm. And what the Buddha is saying here is like, okay, find out what's causing you suffering, get away from that, and then just start doing good. Mm-hmm. Just pay attention to the things that cause suffering, which are largely the antithesis of the Eightfold Path, mm-hmm. and don't do it. Mm-hmm. If you go to the doctor and you say it hurts every time I do this, the doctor's going to say stop doing that.
Right. It's like if there's right posture, there's wrong posture. It's
exactly.
Like you're gonna, have a bad back.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's something paradoxical and I think can be frustrating in a way when you're trying to understand an esoteric tradition like this and its deep inner meaning, and you're thinking about enlightenment as really a thing that you're going to achieve, as something kind of concrete or in front of you, that's maybe you're going to somehow, wake up and the whole world will be transformed. And we have this concept of Buddha nature, or we have the concept of God and immortality, and there's these ultimate realities that are transcendent and without suffering. But as humans, we find ourselves in this place, in this mysterious universe of time and space, where, as we teach in our degrees, there's this checkered, pattern of life, of good and bad, up and down, left and right. We live in a dualistic, dimensional world for now. And so we have to make these decisions. We have to engage our minds and understand the world we live in, and it matters. There's a difference between living wrongly and living rightly, and it's not, again, it's not necessarily something like specific.
Right.
It transcends cultural norms and religious doctrines, but there's certain universal things. It boiled down to simply, seek what's good.
Right.
Turn away from what's evil, and what that is, you're going to have to figure out. But
Right. It's like we all know what doing harm is. It's like, don't do harm, right? Do no harm. It's like,
and people just want to be on the right side. They want to just know, like, okay, I've signed up on the right team, and so now I'm on the good side. I wish it were that simple.
right. Or that there was a trophy afterward or something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
you get a membership card, and now you're
Right.
part of the enlightened team. Or
And there's nowhere that promises that you're going to get fame or fortune or in fact, those are things that cause suffering. And it's like coming back to just training our minds. We come back to also just training ourselves. It's okay to just be. In fact, that's the most freedom that you're going to experience. And not to be lazy.
Right.
We're not saying be lazy, because we're saying be engaged. No, there's that for the Buddha, for Gautama to come out of enjoying enlightenment, to actually get his stuff together and go back to teaching was somewhat difficult for him.
Sure.
Just the same as sometimes when we find that really nice, when we just find ourselves so deeply and we're resonating just in that moment, it is very difficult to come back and to recognize that we live in this construct of men that requires us to go to work. I have felt very deeply how difficult it is to cultivate peace in a society where if everybody were to just stay home for a day and sit mindfully, how long could we sustain that before the needs of society dictated somebody had to get up to go to work to pay their bills, or they would lose their house? Or this corporation would shut down, and so they put undue pressure on those who are working for them to show up at all hours of the day. We've allowed, so many of us have allowed ourselves to be allured by Mara, to be allured by the institution that we've cultivated around us, that calls us against our will to do things that cause suffering, undue suffering, with this allure of a golden carrot that is the fame, fortune, the allure that things will just be better if you get up and you have this thing. They're just so commercially pushing this into people's faces, and we know in our heart of hearts that this is all just an illusion.
And do you react to that in a hostile way, with this feeling of I have to reject all this, I have to run to the woods, and like I did when I was 19, and I have to go join a monastery. And they make a mention in here that at the time of the Buddha, there were many practitioners of different traditions in the woods, and that it wasn't thought of as a world weariness that prompted them to that. It was just a seeking of trying to understand the nature of life and death and reality. And if we, in our practice, look for things to match our conceptions of what we think they're supposed to be, that's a path towards suffering. And we live, especially now, at this time in this world, in such a complex, interconnected, interdependent civilization. It's very hard to be like a Jain saint, where you sweep the ground before you step to make sure you don't kill any insects. We all know that the products we're using are polluting the oceans, and there's all these unintended consequences of just living in the world that we live in. And I think it troubles many of us because we're aware of these things, and at the same time we feel sort of helpless and unsure of how do we change it.
Absolutely.
And to some extent we might not be able to change it. It might be the nature of this world that we're in.
Yet we can cultivate mindfulness
and non-attachment.
And non-attachment. And I think that the position that we have, or where we're called to action, or the bodhisattva in us comes out, is when we are aware. And not only are we aware and saying that it's about not doing this entirely, but a big part of the teaching is finding the spot, that middle pillar, finding the balance between severe asceticism and being too drawn into what it is that's causing that suffering. A part of living in today is participating in society. And though it would be wonderful for us to be able to disappear into an ashram, to disappear into the forest or to a monastery, is that really servicing humanity? And we as Freemasons, then what is the work that we're on about? As much as
we disappear into our lodges.
Twice
a month
as much as we may not be home for dinner.
And is that helping the world?
Is that helping the world? Well, and this is a big thing, and I've had this conversation as well, is one's practice of Freemasonry, is that for you? Are we allowing Freemasonry to surmount our life? Or are we allowing it to supplement it? And ultimately, the teachings that we glean in our lodge, and we glean through our craft, we should be bringing to the world. We should be like Boaz is to Ruth. We should be standing there for widows, for orphans, for those who are suffering. We should be leading society under the eye of something that we all see is ultimately true, and not under the guise of what an individual, a government, or an institution says we should be doing. And it's that I think is in the heart of what Gautama is speaking to, especially towards the layman. He does draw a line and say that there are disciples who he holds to a higher standard. But the Dhammapada and these teachings are for everybody. And it doesn't take conforming, again, to aestheticism to start to cultivate a better community, to cultivate joy not just for ourselves and for our lodge, but to cultivate joy for everybody who we interact with. And ultimately the work then, outside of being what we do as an individual, becomes how do we promote, or what are we doing to teach others to respond instead of reacting in fear. And it's the response mechanism, responding in love, that I feel this section really really is drawing us to. And then giving us the mechanism, giving us the machinery by which to avoid suffering and to cultivate joy.
And the motivation emphasized so much in here in the awareness of the fleetingness of time, the inevitability of death, which always comes without warning. It's always a surprise. And that we must act now with some sense of urgency.
Absolutely.
Being here and now, being present to the now. What needs to be done here and now? What needs to be here and now? This is the only time we have. You know.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue into our final quote, which is going to be verse 259, page 200, which reads, Dharma is not upheld by talking about it. Dharma is upheld by living in harmony with it, even if one is not learned. Now, Malik, you had proposed this quote, and I think it's beautiful. It's so beautiful, and it gets really to the heart of the essence of what truth is. You know, how many of us are actually, as upright men and masons, taking what we learn in Lodge and bringing it home? How many of us are taking the teachings and incorporating it into our life, or bringing it to our Sangha? If you could give one practical, actionable teaching of the Dhammapada and of Dharma for our Masonic audience, what would it be?
Practice what you preach. It's one of the things stated in the Dhammapada. It's I think a perennial theme in Masonry is it takes more than the outer trappings of aprons or pins or titles to be the model of what we aspire to be as Masons. And we know it when we see it. Right? And I think that's something that in our lodge, while not formally recognized by any governing body in this way, which we don't seek, we don't feel the need for, but we think of ourselves as a traditional observance lodge. And one of the ideas, I believe, from Laudable Pursuit, I picked up the book about traditional observances. The idea of thinking of your lodge in a passionate, sincere way, kind of hyperbolically saying, as fundamentalist, born-again Freemasonry, in the sense that we take what we do seriously. We practice it earnestly, which earnest practice is another theme of the Dhammapada. And that we can all do that as Masons. We can engage with our tradition sincerely. It doesn't mean that we, have blind kind of faith or confidence necessarily in every part of the tradition, but we engage with it thoughtfully, intentionally, and in an earnest way to understand it and practice it.
Yeah, I would say practice stillness, in whatever that means, in whatever way, for whomever that might be. In ritual, in preparing for ritual, in practice in Buddhism, in everything we do in our lives, especially in big city, in a city where we're always rushing, we're always moving, everything never stops. That intentionality to just practice stillness. When I was doing my memory work with, going through my degrees and going through and participating in degree work, always had to stop in the middle and just, because if you go too fast, you start either tripping on your own words or you start not making sense. And the experience that we're supposed to have during degree work, you know, like the power of it is that we can say the same words over and over and over again, but it's how we do it, how it impresses upon someone who's seeing it for the first time or seeing it for the millionth time, saying, wow, I felt that, right? Right breathing. So you gotta practice stillness, right? But that also goes to, I think that's what's really happening here. And I think, you know, the really deep, profound experience of just kind of reading through it, going through it, it's like you said, it just stops you, right? You know, that stillness and like now you can choose to be still. You know, that I think is at least as practical as it can be. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you can sit and stare at the wall for hours and hours and hours, or if it's just a long, deep breath. You know, as you're going through or reading through or thinking through whatever you're thinking about, that instant, that moment of stillness, without it, all the movement becomes meaningless. Right? It's the stillness that makes the meaning from moment to moment.
Yeah. I love both of those teachings. I love both of those ideas. And I love to know that brothers are not just sitting around talking about what it is that they can do, but that brothers go out and actually do these things. And like just with this quote, you know, how much of the time are we spent talking about how great it would be to just sit in stillness? But meanwhile, we're so busy, we don't make time for it. We don't have that earnest effort.
There's no time to meditate. We got to get this podcast produced.
Yeah. You know, I thank both of you so dearly for being here, for participating tonight in this conversation. It really means the world to me, not only to have you brothers here and being willing to read the text, but also to be able to invite two brothers who are largely an authority on this text, on this material, and who I see practice the Dharma in their lives as well. It's very humbling for me to be here with both of you. I really can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you for inviting me and
Yeah.
us.
Yes.
And just on that note of referring to me as an authority, I feel compelled to say I am just a simple student with very little understanding. And, you know, as the Dhammapada says, if a fool at least knows he's a fool, at least he's wise in that. So that's where I place myself.
I love that. That's exactly right. You know, we're all on the level, and so, yeah. I mean, I appreciate. You know, really happy that we were able to have this conversation, be together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, tonight we've been reading the Dhammapada, introduced and translated by Eknath Easwaran. It's been such an influential text in my life, Jason's life, Malik's life, and it could be an influential text in your life as well. I highly recommend it. Not for anybody who is particularly just looking for Buddhism, but for everybody in general. It's a very accessible read, one you can experience in an afternoon. On behalf of Craftsmen Online and the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library, I thank you. I also thank our technical director for the evening, Ryan Ela, for helping us to bring this program to you live. I would like to also extend the utmost gratitude for our Grand Master, Most Worshipful Stephen Adam Rubin, who we will allow to take us out.
My brother, we are each on our own journey. That doesn't change with the color of our aprons, the initials that precede our name, or the numbers that follow. Yet too often, too much of our Masonic experience is consumed by the mundane yet necessary work of attending to the business of our lodges. While the social and charitable aspects of our craft are cherished parts of our tradition, they too can command an inordinate share of our time and efforts. But what of improving ourselves as men and Masons? There is an undeniable thirst in modern Freemasonry for the esoteric knowledge entrusted to the care of well-informed brethren. For as long as the craft has existed, brethren have gathered together within lodges and without to exchange, share, offer Masonic insights, thoughts, and ideas. So I congratulate you, my brother, for your inquisitive mind, and thank you for joining us for Craftsmen Online's Reading Room, where Masonic scholars are always welcomed.